2. The gate bars the way forward. The Goblin Flyover Technique? Asks Gnarles of Charles. His robe is simple and green, his wizard's hat bent, and his eyes bright with hunger. A grunt from his companion. Gnarles weaves his fingers together to make a step and sets his feet firmly in the ground. He is a sturdy person, but this will be unpleasant. He groans under the weight as a bare blue foot, yellow with the dust of the road, lands in his hands and pushes up. The barbarian launches into the air. In a flash of movement, the bird perceives its danger, but it is too late. The large blue hands cup around it. The barbarian lands back on the ground and rolls between two tents. Gnarles hurries after him, tipping a crooked wizard's hat of farewell toward the purple and gold painted carriage behind. Gnarles peers over the barbarian's round blue shoulder. "Give it to me, please. You're an illiterate barbarian, after all."
Chagall doesn't need reading to use a paper.
The wide face breaks into a grin, exposing a pair of tusks protruding from the lower jaw. Chagall's color flushes to purple as he takes a deep breath of air and walks importantly toward the city gate. The pikemen there have probably more often skewered one of his ancestors than let them pass. Gnarles flips through a small, dirty, worn book until his fingers find the heading Distractions. His eyes scan the page. Yes, that's right. A handful of dirt and a mouthful of air. Not the other way around. "Door closed for the day," intones the guard.
"Messengers,"
Chagall says. He waves the paper at the pikemen.
"Make way!"
A pair of the sharp blades lower to rest within a hand's breadth of his chest. The smallest of the three guards steps forward between the pikes to examine the paper in Chagall's hand. He looks at the other guards with resignation. The carriage rolls into motion behind them. Gnarles walks up behind Chagall with his cheeks puffed out and a handful of dust in his hand. He nonchalantly throws the dust in the air behind him and puffs out his breath. A yellow mist boils up out of the dust and rises between the gate and the carriage. People cry out in confusion. "Poison fog!" exclaims Gnarles. The guards hurry Chagall through as they scramble back to close the gate.
"Him too!"
Chagall bellows as he reaches a long arm to hook Gnarles at the collar. The guard relents, and Gnarles slips through. At the last moment, the gate closes. Houses stacked on top of each other, the streets strewn with offal, gutters running with bile, flies swarming at the intersections to compete with mosquitoes hovering over rainwater barrels.
"Men live like this?"
asked Chagall with disappointment. Half-orc and grown up in the wildlands, he'd been waiting to see how the other half, his human half, lived. This was not the homecoming he'd expected.
"Our beasts live better."
"What did that message say?" asked Gnarles, impressed with the barbarian.
"Oh, should Chagall know? Gnarles is magician."
He handed the paper to Gnarles as he strode purposely away from the gate. Gnarles trotted to keep pace. "Reading is just the beginning of magic, as I've said before, old friend." Gnarles took the scrap of paper in hand. On one side was a stamp or seal of some local lord. That must have held sway with the guards. On the other side was what seemed to be a map, or part of a map. He ran his hand over the torn edges. "When I call you illiterate, it is merely a statement of fact, and in no way an insult."
"When I call you a magician, it is an insult,"
muttered Chagall in his native tongue.
"Maybe you go too far. This is why my people avoid magic. You should not control the life. if you're not looking in the eyes. That's our way. It was too much to poison those people outside.
As they rounded the corner of a large, leaning wooden building, Chagall spun and put a hand on Gnarles' shoulder.
There are beasts, but no beast deserves to choke. Poison fog.
Poison? Gnarles repeated in the language of orcs. Oh, the fog! Gnarles laughed, switching back into the trade's language. It's just ordinary fog, Chagall. Won't outlast the next light breeze that comes along. Thick and disorienting, but perfectly breathable, harmless.
Give me a message,
said Chagall, taking it from Gnarles.
Anything from Greenbird is a good sign. They are messengers used by the wood spiritualists.
2 sides of the paper were torn. It's part of a larger page, you see. My guess is we are looking at a map. But to where? Chagall felt the page, sniffed it.
Sticky.
He dipped the message into a rain barrel. What are you doing? The ink! Oh, Shocker, you ruined it! But as Chagall held the map up in the sunlight, the water twinkled and a faint drawing appeared. It depicted a building facade, down a short flight of steps, with a large pair of wings over it.
There's a dragon in the town.
And it hides in a tavern underground? Whispered Gnarles in awe. Good work, partner. Chagall smiled.
Gnarles right. Reading not so hard.
He tapped his nose. The gate opened behind them. The gold and purple carriage rolled through. The 2 companions broke into a run, comparing the drawing to buildings they passed. I don't know if we're prepared to face the dragon, Shaka.
It will want its map back, Gnarles.
Good point, replied Gnarles, though he couldn't imagine that this put them in any better position. Still, better to keep a positive attitude. It's taken days of persuasion just to get Chagall to set our steps toward this frontier town, and if there's one thing Chagall understands, it is hunting beasts